Shelley. I'm a life and relationship coach and an intuitive empath, and today I want to have a bit of a discussion with you about empathy and narcissists, and if you're an empath, how you can protect yourself a little bit so that you don't feel like a victim to everyone else's feelings. Empathy, as far as I can see, is largely misunderstood. My concern is that people use empathy as a way of making themselves a victim. I hear a lot from clients that they're concerned that they're empaths and they feel everyone else's feelings, and therefore they have to change their life in some way because they're so sensitive to other people's feelings. There's certainly a case to be made for the fact that if you're an empath, it's going to be more uncomfortable for you to be around toxic people, narcissists, psychopaths, or just plain jerks is going to be more uncomfortable for you. But that doesn't mean to say that you need to run away. I think that any response that means that you isolate yourself more is not a good one. I'm all for getting narcissists, psychopaths and toxic people out of your life. But if you're in the workplace and you're around these people, for instance, maybe it's not in your best interest to leave your job and change your career because of someone else. Maybe these people are around you in your family and you're not ready to go no contact, or you can't isolate yourself from one toxic person in the family because it will then isolate you from everybody else. So I think it's really important that empathy is understood on a deeper level. So I want this to be a kind of discussion. I'm not saying that I know everything. I've done a lot of research on empathy because I see myself as being an empath. I certainly have psychic intuitive gifts, and I am able to read people's feelings really well, and that enables me to help people and do what I do. So I see it as a gift. I don't see it as a negative. So let's look at empathy. What is it? Empathy is the ability to be able to tune into or feel someone else's feelings. Now, from my higher guidance sources, I've been told that we are all born with different levels of empathy. Some people are born with lots of empathy and some people are born with not much. So already in the population we have a spectrum of how much someone else can tune into your feelings. Then there is the fact that we have people on the planet who have no empathy, and they would be psychopaths. As far as I know, that's the only group of people who don't have any empathy at all. So they're a little bit machine-like in a way. They don't feel other people's feelings. Then we have narcissists, who some people think narcissists don't have empathy, but from everything that I've read and all the research I've done, that's not true. If you have a look at Sam Vaknin's book, Malignant Narcissism, he's a narcissist. He will say that narcissists do have empathy. They just have a different form of empathy. It's called cold empathy. So they can see that someone else is feeling something. They could probably name that thing that someone else is feeling, but they don't actually feel it themselves. Whereas somebody who is highly empathic will not only see that someone is feeling some deep emotion, they'll be able to name that deep emotion. They'll also feel what it feels like in their own body for that person to be having that emotion. So that's the difference between cold empathy and what you might call warm empathy. I'm pretty sure that we're born with different levels of empathy, and I'll tell you why. Because I've watched small children, And you can see in children as young as 2 that some children have empathy. If they hurt another child on purpose or accidentally, and the other child starts to cry, some of them will get really upset, and you can see that they feel guilty and they have conscience, and they're like, oh, are you okay? You know, they can feel that they can really feel that they've hurt another child. There are other children who hurt others all the time and seem to feel nothing and have no conscience about it and no caring when they've caused or inflicted pain on someone else. So I really do think that we're born with different levels of empathy. I see empathy as a gift. Sometimes clients come to me and they say, I'm struggling because I'm oversensitive. And I would always say to them, really? Sensitivity is a gift. What does that mean? It means that you perceive a broader range of information. You perceive a broader range of information than everybody else. You're capable of feeling higher highs and lower lows, perhaps. You're tuning in to a broader bandwidth of vibrational frequency from which you are drawing information and making, interpreting things. So I think that's a gift. I have always perceived that as a gift in myself. So it's actually a good thing. Being empathic is a great thing. The problem with sensitivity and empathy is that it's only a great thing when you learn how to manage your own thoughts, emotions, and feelings. If you're not doing that, then you're going to find sensitivity and empathy a burden. So how do we manage our own thoughts and feelings? You've got to be in control of your mind, right? You don't let your mind run around like a naughty child thinking whatever it wants to think. Your mind is like a muscle, and you need to exercise it. This is one of the reasons why meditation is so wonderful, because what you're constantly doing when you're meditating is every time your mind wanders off, like a naughty child, getting distracted, you just gently bring it back to whatever it is you're focusing on. You could be focusing on a mantra or some music or a feeling or a visualization. It doesn't matter what it is you're doing, but every time your mind wanders off, you bring it back and you bring it back and you bring it back. And the more that you do that, the more you're training your mind to behave, to do what you want it to do, instead of just running all around like a mad woman's underwear, which is pretty much what most people do. I think the issue is that no one ever taught us that we needed to control our minds or that it was a good thing. I know no one taught me. But when I taught myself how to do it and I learned that that was a good thing, it made an enormous difference in my life. And then I started teaching my clients how to do it, and I realised it made an enormous difference in their lives, because the thought always comes first, and it triggers a chemical cascade in our bodies that we would interpret as an emotion of some sort, energy in motion. The thought comes first and the emotion follows. So if you're having lots of negative emotions, if you're someone who is anxious, which is fear, by the way, let's call it fear, what it really is. If you're feeling fear, if you're feeling anger, if you're feeling lots of hurt and sadness, and those feelings are causing you to suffer and they're uncomfortable, you have to look to your thoughts. You have to look to what it is that you are spending your time thinking about. Science tells us that we have 60,000 separate thoughts in a day. And if that's the case, how many of your thoughts are positive, life-enhancing, and taking you in the direction that you want to go, or eliciting good feelings from you, and how many of them are torturing you and causing you to suffer? And you think and think and think about things obsessively that cause you to feel fearful. That's a malfunction of your mind and the way it was meant for you to work. So it's the same with being highly sensitive or empathic. Once you learn how to control your mind and control your emotions, and be judicious and discerning about what you're going to give your energy to. And just because you have empathy doesn't mean to say you have to allow yourself to feel empathy for everyone. You have to use your rational mind and your intellect to decide, is that someone that is worthy of my empathy today? Because people do all sorts of things. They make bad choices for themselves. They get themselves into trouble. It's not that we need to be uncaring, but it's not always our business to fix them. People have to learn their own lessons. Sometimes we all have to fall down a lot and get ourselves back up before we learn. If you are someone who has been struggling with your feelings of empathy for others, then you have some work to do on yourself. That's the basic meaning of what I'm trying to get across here, I guess. That, for instance, I cannot watch movies that have somebody embarrassing themselves. You know, it might be a stupid comedy movie and somebody's doing something really, really, really excruciatingly embarrassing. I can't watch it. I have to fast forward through it because the pain of feeling their embarrassment is really distressing to me, so I don't want to watch it. I never watch horror movies because I don't want to feel fearful. I can't stand all those slapstick comedy reality shows where people take movies of other people hurting themselves. They'll take a video of a baby falling down and hurting herself and crying. And I'm like, oh my God, how can you get off on watching this stuff? I just feel for that baby that has fallen down. So, you know, there are things that we're going to do to make ourselves feel more comfortable, but you have to learn that you can't always withdraw from everything. You have to learn that you can't always withdraw from society, from people, from jobs, from situations. Sometimes you've got to be able to be in it and control your own sense of empathy by pulling your energy back. And one simple way of doing that I teach people is that when you find yourself projecting your attention towards others all of the time, right, or you're projecting your attention towards someone that you don't want to, you just pull your energy back in, like physically imagine pulling your energy back in and give yourself a bit of a tap on the chest and say, me, 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 me. My life is about me. I came here to live my life, my truth. It's about me. Because the one thing empaths do is that they have, you know, they tend to be people pleasers and a bit approval seeking, and they kind of naturally put others' feelings before their own, because quite often for the empath, the other person's feelings can seem more intense and louder to them than their own feelings. And so that's a distortion. You have to learn how not to do that. You have to learn that your feelings are first, other people's feelings follow. Now, in my work, when I'm working with someone, if I'm doing a reading or I'm working with someone as a coach, I want to tune into their feelings. I want to feel what they're feeling, okay? But I'm doing that on purpose. I'm not going to do it all the time. If I go out and I find myself around someone who is a narcissist and they're talking about themselves all the time, they want all the attention, you know, the ones, they won't listen, they're not interested in who you are, you could be a cardboard cutout, they just want to talk at you. I have very limited patience for those people. Another thing about empathy that I think we need to consider is that some intense feelings of empathy may have been exacerbated by childhood trauma. So if you're a child and you have a lot of empathy and you're born with a lot of empathy, and then you grow up in a dysfunctional, toxic family where there is abuse and violence, alcoholism, drug addiction, abandonment, neglect, all of those sorts of awful things. And you're in a scary environment. So the child is in a scary environment. A child that is highly empathic and is probably going to become more hypervigilant. So some children in those really scary, dysfunctional, toxic families will go the other way and become really self-absorbed and learn to dissociate or tune out and be in their own little world to protect themselves. And some children have an opposite response. These are probably children that are empathic but highly attuned to service to others type, you know, more rescuer types who think they can fix things. And so a hypervigilant child will be always kind of watching what's going on around them because they're not safe, and they feel that if they can control their environment, or they're constantly aware that they can protect themselves from dangerous or horrible things happening to them. Well, natural coping strategy. But if you're a child that's grown up in that kind of environment, you're going to become an adult who is also hypervigilant. You may be an adult who is controlling. And I think sometimes empathy and hypervigilance get confused. It's certainly not good to be controlling in a relationship, but being able to be controlling is one of those assets that's highly prized in the workplace. Depending on your job, that hypervigilance is probably highly prized in the workplace too, because you notice everything that's going on, you're tuned into everything, and you've got 20 balls juggling in the air. Yeah, that sort of stuff's highly prized in the workplace. So I think some people who are hypervigilant might think that they're highly empathic when maybe they're not. Maybe they're just the children of trauma. The other interesting thing about empathy is this, that from studying the brain, what we know is that there's a cascade of effects that happen, more particularly in men than in women, that they think is a biological adaptation because men have to go out and fight woolly mammoths or go to war. And that is that when men get highly adrenalized and get angry, all the blood rushes from their frontal cortex and the blood rushes to the hindbrain at the back. So you might say they become cavemen. And we know that when that effect happens, that there is an effect on the level of empathy that they feel. So this happens to men and women. It's just that it's more pronounced, as far as I know, in men. So when men get angry, they lose their capacity for empathy. And if you have been in relationship with somebody, ladies, if you've been in relationship with somebody who has anger issues, you'll know that when they get really, really intensely angry, they seem to lose empathy. They don't care about your feelings. And we know this is true of everyone because, look at yourself in the mirror and think to yourself, well, have I ever gotten really angry and said something mean that I later regretted, or was really uncaring about somebody's feelings because I was angry with them in that moment and I didn't care how they felt? Well, that's a lack of empathy or a loss of empathy. So this is also at play in the whole situation too. When you get angry, you become less empathic. You care less about your opponent's feelings. In battle, that's necessary. If you're going to go into battle and you're going to kill someone, you don't want to be caring about how they feel. That's going to make it much more difficult for you to do your job properly. So that's why I say it's a biological adaptation, and I think that's why it's more present in men. Now that has effects on relationship, doesn't it? Because if you are in a relationship with somebody who suffers from anger issues and can't control their anger and gets intensely angry or goes into rages, they're going to do and say things that they may later regret, that they find hard to take back. Another thing about empathy that I think we need to consider is that some intense feelings of empathy may have been exacerbated by childhood trauma. So if you're a child and you have a lot of empathy and you're born with a lot of empathy, and then you grow up in a dysfunctional, toxic family where there is abuse and violence, alcoholism, drug addiction, abandonment, neglect, all of those sorts of awful things. And you're in a scary environment. So the child is in a scary environment. A child that is highly empathic and is probably going to become more hypervigilant. So some children in those really scary, dysfunctional, toxic families will go the other way and become really self-absorbed and learn to dissociate or tune out and be in their own little world to protect themselves. And some children have an opposite response. These are probably children that are empathic but highly attuned to service to others type, you know, more rescuer types who think they can fix things. And so a hypervigilant child will be always kind of watching what's going on around them because they're not safe, and they feel that if they can control their environment, or they're constantly aware that they can protect themselves from dangerous or horrible things happening to them. Well, natural coping strategy. But if you're a child that's grown up in that kind of environment, you're going to become an adult who is also hypervigilant. You may be an adult who is controlling. And I think sometimes empathy and hypervigilance get confused. It's certainly not good to be controlling in a relationship, but being able to be controlling is one of those assets that's highly prized in the workplace. Depending on your job, you know, that hypervigilance is probably, you know, highly prized in the workplace too, because you notice everything that's going on, you're tuned into everything, and you know, you've got 20 balls juggling in the air. Yeah, that sort of stuff's highly prized in the workplace. So I think some people who are hypervigilant might think that they're highly empathic when maybe they're not. Maybe they're just the children of trauma. The thing about getting yourself into a relationship with someone that has no empathy is that it's probably going to be painful. Empathy is highly prized when you know how to direct it properly. I mean, we want the people that we're in love with, who love us, to care about our feelings, to be able to feel our feelings and to empathize with us. Are you an empath? If you are, I'd like to hear from you. Leave me a comment. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion today. If you've liked the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. And until we meet again, namaste.